Well, good morning to everyone in the DCC family. I want to welcome you back to the Daily Drive. Our goal for this podcast is for you to know Jesus a little better so we can live like him a little more. And today I want us to continue our conversation on the subject of humility from the first chapter of Mark's Gospel. Everything we've been learning this week has centered around the life of John the Baptist. But today, I want us to learn something about humility from the people who are coming to John. According to verse 5, people are traveling from all over the Judean countryside to come to John. And verse 5 says they are coming to John to confess their sins. Now, I know it's easy for us to just glide over that statement, but I really want us to slow down and think about what's happening here. People from all walks of life are coming to John and they're confessing their sins to him. They're telling him the worst things they've ever done in their life. Maybe even the worst things they've done that week or that day. Here's my question. When's the last time you did that? When's the last time any of us did that? And the reason we have to slow down and think about it is this practice is radically different from what we see people doing in our culture. People today rarely admit that they're wrong, but instead they spend a whole lot of time trying to prove where they're right, because we struggle with this thing called pride. It takes a lot of humility to confess your sins. It takes a lot of humility to admit you have a drug or alcohol problem. It takes a lot of humility, students, to admit to your parents you've been using language you shouldn't use. It takes a lot of humility for a husband to admit they're burying their family in debt and they're hiding credit card statements from their spouse. It takes a lot of humility for a mom to admit to another mom she's constantly yelling at her kids. But when it comes to confession, there's something very important we have to remember. The goal of confession isn't to humiliate yourself, it's to heal yourself. I've heard it said before that confession is like the vomit of the soul. I know that's a disgusting phrase to think about today, but when you practice confession, you're getting something out of you that's making you sick, and you're creating space for healing to take place. And so today, I want to encourage you to confess your sins. At a minimum, I'd encourage you to confess your sins to God. Don't try to justify yourself, and don't try to explain it away. Confess it to him and be specific with him. After you confess your sins, I'd encourage you to read John chapter 3, verse 16, and thank God that he sent Jesus into this world to forgive you of your sin and not condemn you because of your sin. For those of you wanting to go a little bit deeper in this practice, I'd encourage you to read James chapter 5, verse 16, and do what it says. James 5 says to confess your sins to one another and pray for each other so that you may be healed. Confess your sin to a godly influence in your life. Confess your sin to someone who will pray for you on the spot and not let you off the hook. Confess your sin to someone who will tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear, so that healing can begin to take place in your life. Confession is hard. It takes a lot of humility, but when we do, healing will begin to take place in our lives.